How do we know if we're live?
You are.
We are live. Hi, everybody out there, and hello to John Kleinheinz and Josh Haven. Josh is the author of The Siberia Job, this fantastic thriller, just an extraordinary book. When I read the manuscript to this, I thought this was impossible, that no real world could actually have this story in it as a largely true story, which it is. And Josh had this story told to him by John and a Czech. Where did you talk to the Czech?
Nassau in the Bahamas.
In the Bahamas. It's what you'd expect for a Russian book to be discussed in the Bahamas.
Well, this is international man of mystery stuff.
It sure is. And if you, I don't know how much you know about this book, but it's a true story. I mean, obviously, I'm going to let John or Josh talk about it. But I just want to let you know that it's a largely true story. It is fictionalized, of course. There are elements that have been simplified because it involves money, And when I read this, there are two kinds of books. I've been publishing for 48 years, and there are two kinds of books I've never published. One is medical books, because I'm a real weenie. I just can't stand the whole blood thing, And the other are books about finances, because when you're a publisher and a bookseller, trust me, you don't know anything about money, like real money. So when I read this book, and Josh had made it simple, although it includes things like the IMF. I didn't even know what the IMF was. It's the International Monetary Fund. But he made it all simple and easy to understand, and that was a great achievement. So let me just ask first, Josh, how many people did you interview for this book? We know you talked to John. We know you talked to Peter.
Quite a few. Some of the other guys who are in the book I talked to. The banker character was a real guy, owner of Uncle Gilly's. The owner of the Hungry Duck was a real guy. And just various other people who were doing business in Russia at the time, most of whom didn't really want to be publicly connected to the book for various reasons.
For obvious reasons.
Yeah.
I guess I really should have provided a little bit more context first. The book is largely set in Russia, much of it in Siberia, eastern Siberia, the story is really the beginning of the Russian oligarchy, following the 1992 breakup of the Soviet Union. In 1994. Russia decided that it was going to privatize its major industries. And so this American, again, to simplify, we're just going to use John. There are lots of other Americans involved in this, just as there are two Peters who are Czechs. But in the book, Josh made them into one person, again, just for clarity. The American and the Czech decide to go in and get some of these companies that were going private, and they did it in a very sophisticated way, filling suitcases with American money, American dollars.
And, hey, Otto, yeah. Can I just put some historical perspective behind this real quickly? Okay, so remember, the Berlin Wall fell in late 1989. The Russian economy went into a tailspin. The command economy, where all the factories were told what to make and how much to make, and they were paying workers with worthless money. By 1992, the economy had completely bottomed, and what had been sort of the black market kind of emerged as the free market system. And the Russians and the IMF and the EBRD decided that the best thing Russia could do to make communism something that they couldn't return to would be to privatize everything. So the Russian government went about privatizing virtually all of their companies. It's all their oil and gas, fertilizer, steel, aluminum, cement, everything they had. And they did it through this voucher auction approach. And they sold these companies at prices, companies were being sold in the voucher auctions at 1% to 2% of their value of what they would have been trading on a US or a European exchange.
If I could just interrupt for 1 second.
Sure.
The voucher system that John refers to was that each citizen in Russia would get a voucher, which you could then turn into a share of stock in the company that issued those vouchers. Just to keep it clear, since most of the people tuning in are people that we want to buy the book, not people who have already bought it and read it. So I just wanted to clarify that. Okay, keep going.
So it was an incredibly exciting time. There were everybody was showing up in Moscow. It was sort of a gold rush type mentality, and we were all there to try to make a lot of money. And it was a really important time in my career because it was early in my career, and I made a lot of my best friends in the business, and it was the first time I ever felt like I was part of history. And anyway, I've been wanting to tell this story for 30 years, and when my partner in the deal, Peter Kellner, was killed tragically in a helicopter ski accident a couple of years ago, I decided I wanted to work on it, and was introduced to Josh by Josh's literary agent, Warren Fraser, who's a tremendous guy. I talked to Warren to try to help me find someone to work on this book, and he said he had his man. It was Josh, and he was right. And Josh did an incredible job meeting with all these people, listening to all the research, and crafting a slightly fictionalized version of the story that actually happened. So that's kind of the perspective. Josh, maybe you can talk a little bit about how your challenges of kind of working in all these disparate people and plots into a great narrative.
Well, it wasn't actually as challenging in absolute terms as you might think, just because it was such a good story to begin with. If it had been a duller story, it would have been a lot harder to turn it into a novel. Fortunately, most of the stuff really happened, and it was such an exciting series of events in such an exciting place in such an exciting time that it really lent itself to being novelized.
The book is nonstop action. I mean, there's movement every page. There's no downtime where you say, okay, let's move this along a little bit. No, that does not exist in this book. It just keeps going at a breakneck pace, and you meet really fantastically interesting people that is kind of hard to believe that they were all real, but only you know which ones you made up or which you synthesized a variety of people and made them into a single character. But Josh is also the author of Fake Money, Blue Smoke, which is also a very exciting thriller, which is a nonstop pace. The reviews always talk about how it is nonstop. So evidently, Warren, the agent who put John and Josh together, knew what he was doing because Josh was just the right guy to tell this story.
Couldn't agree more.
So,
hi, Warren.
Some of this story had been told before, right, John, for the to the Wall Street Journal in about 2015. Is that correct? My memory right?
I think the Wall Street Journal article ran in 1995 or 1996, and
okay.
And the head of the bureau there, the Wall Street Journal bureau in Moscow, worked on it with a reporter named Steve Leisman, who we all now see on TV a lot on CNBC. And they did a fabulous job. This transaction was a secret transaction. The company didn't want anybody to talk about it. We didn't want anybody to talk about it. It just didn't make any sense for people to know that we were doing this transaction. Not because we were doing anything illegal. It just didn't make any sense for people to know that we had done this. Mostly from the company standpoint. Wall Street Journal guys did great investigative reporting and came up with a pretty accurate outline of how the transaction worked and all the different pieces and who the players were. And when it came out, it was really we were really worried, and we were worried. I wasn't worried. I was sitting in Texas with my lovely wife Marcia, but our partners in the Czech Republic and Moscow were worried that the people in Gazprom were gonna think that they leaked the story, and they might be at risk and be in danger. And Peter Faligi, who was part of the research process in this, went to Moscow and met with the CFO of Gazprom and basically talked her out of having everybody killed. So, it was one of those. It was a touch and go moment, but and it's unfortunate, but that article almost got people in trouble. So.
The original title of this book, by the way, was The Gazprom Conspiracy, and I didn't want Gazprom to be in the title of the book because, as it happens, there were a large number of the people who were involved in all of this process had fatal accidents and were committing suicide at an astonishing rate, generally falling out of windows. Apparently, defenestration became a fad for half the people who were involved in this book. So
it's a Prague tradition.
Yeah. So we changed the name of the company to Gasneft, which just means gas oil, and there's no such company. But anybody who knows anything about the energy.
But this is a secret, so no one watching this video.
There are no Russian agents watching this show. I'm pretty confident. So, are you aware of the number of people, both of you, Josh and John, who have incurred unfortunate accidents since the story occurred?
More than a few.
Yeah, I mean, there's clearly a lot of Gazprom people who have bit the dust, so to speak. I don't think many of those people were associated with this transaction. This transaction happened almost 30 years ago, and those folks are largely retired and out of the company. So I'm guessing the fellow that fell off of his yacht into the ocean and broke his neck was involved with something else at Gazprom other than this. So I'm not too concerned, Otto.
Maybe he was the guy in charge of security for the Nord Stream pipeline.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, no, I'm not concerned now, but I had some trepidation when I read more about Russians who had gone on to a different place. So,
when I first asked John about this, if I was going to get bumped off if I wrote the book, he responded by saying no, and then instantly segued into two different stories of writers getting assassinated for writing books. So it made for an amusing conversation. Not really a great vote of confidence, but I was in too deep by that point.
There was a journalist who appears throughout the book. He keeps coming in different times to try to get this the complete story. And I believe you told me, Josh, or maybe it was John, my memory, whatever, that he didn't get out of Russia. Is that true?
Right. Yeah, he was killed. I talked to his family, who asked me not to use his real name, though said I could use the real details of his death. But yeah, he was one of the writers who John referred to when I asked him if anyone had been killed in connection to this. He said, "Well, they never kill Americans. Well, almost never. Not American writers. Well, I mean, except for this one." Yeah.
Well, he was Russian American, and he was in charge of the Forbes office in Moscow, and he was in charge of putting together the Forbes 400 list. And it's a terribly sad and tragic way. He was killed in a drive-by shooting outside of his office, but it wasn't clear whether he was killed by somebody who made the list and didn't want their name to appear on it, or somebody who didn't make the list and was upset that their name wasn't on it. So
any excuse to kill somebody. So the way the way the book is structured is John and Peter have this conversation, and they decide that they're going to go and become billionaires in Russia and fill up suitcases with American dollars. And they wind up buying all these tons of vouchers for those American dollars. And the interest, there's a really interesting scene where they've got all of this and know that they're going to be just insanely rich because they've got all these vouchers that they're going to be turning in. And then they're confronted by a KGB guy, right? What happens then?
Well, the KGB guy was real, and right, John, you negotiated with him. I mean, he was in charge of security for Gazprom, I think, or partly in charge of security, and he was working with John and John's people, and then later also was put in charge of figuring out how John and John's people were doing what they were doing, because these were supposed to be off the grid auctions that no one was going to know about, and someone was leaking their locations. And so he became, I think he was put in charge of investigating his own perfidy, which made for an amusing twist of events in real life and great for the novel. So
yeah, well, in the novel, you as I recall, and I read this manuscript pretty long time ago, he confronts John and Peter and says, I'm going to be your partner. And you guys say, well, we actually don't need a partner. And he says, yes, you do, because I'm the only person who knows where you trade the vouchers in for shares of the company. And they did, in fact, make him a partner. And he told them where the 4 places were where you could trade in these vouchers to take over Gosneft. And they were all in tiny villages in eastern Siberia, 2-day train trips to get out there. Just fascinating story about the trains and the girl on the train.
So the gist of that is correct. That the voucher auctions were in remote places. One of them was so remote it was inside the North Pole. It was up in the Yamal prefecture, which is north of Siberia, and where most of Gazprom's reserves are in their LNG facilities. So places like that we flew to. Other places they may have taken the train to. I think there's some artistic liberty in how that all happened, but it did happen. So
yeah, just to keep the book flowing, I didn't want you going back to Moscow in between every auction, so I put them all on the Trans-Siberia Railway route, just to keep things moving along. But I think I can be forgiven for that.
No, it's your job as a novelist to keep it moving along, and you did. And there were impediments along the way. There were people who found out what your plan was, and they were trying to stop you. And how did they do that? Cue to you.
Hey, John, you want to take this, or shall I?
You start. I'll finish.
Well, I think the biggest way they tried to stop John and Peter's progress was by saying, we're going to kill you if you don't stop making progress. So that was pretty decisive. But essentially, the people who wanted to own the stock in the company as it was privatized, when they found out that John and Peter had acquired a huge share of the company, just told them that, look, you can either turn the company over to us, turn your stock over to us, or we're going to kill you. And it's a tough negotiating position to work with.
Yeah, you got it. That's what they said. That was their opening bargaining position. Give us the stock, or we're going to kill you. Actually, I think their first position was, we're just going to kill you. It doesn't matter.
Well, so
we'll just take it after you're dead.
Yeah.
The positions softened considerably from "we're just going to kill you" to maybe not.
Yeah, they softened up.
Yeah. Ultimately, and in the book, the negotiations take place pretty quickly. and are resolved. And but actually, in real life, the negotiations took several months, and we ended up surrendering a big percentage of our stock, 75 or 80% of the stock. But in lieu of that, the company gave us GDRs, global depository receipts, that were tradable in London. So we didn't have to worry about getting our shares registered. We got shares that were worth much more than the ordinary shares that traded in Moscow and Russia. And so in the end, it was a somewhat of a win-win deal. The Gazprom people got stock, we got our stock. We were able to sell it to people who wanted to buy it. The people who bought it made lots of money on it. We sold way too early. We sold it $6 or $7 a share, and the stock ultimately went to $40 a share. So,
wait a minute, you're supposed to be a smart businessman, John.
Well, we bought it for 25 cents, Otto, and sold it for 18. So
yeah, he did all right, I think.
Yeah, it was not a bad deal by any record.
But the trick of it was that John and his guys figured out how they could get a hold of the stock in the first place when it was only negotiable in Russia and only negotiable for Russians. And they ended up with the stock they could take out of the country and sell wherever they wanted, which was really the essence of beating the corruption was getting it out of the country where they could sell it however they wanted.
Yeah, that's right.
So who was the first guy to say that give us your shares or we'll kill you? Were those Gazprom people? Was that the mafia? Was that who was that?
Well, those people were talking to our we had a lot of people working on the transaction in Moscow. A lot of them were from the Czech Republic. So that was being delivered to those people on the ground in Moscow. Nobody said that to my face, but it got to me pretty quickly.
Okay. So there were other impediments to your trip to Siberia. Now, Josh, you can either confess that you made some of this up, or you can tell us that they really happened, and we'll believe you. So,
well, a lot of them really happened. A few of them were made up.
Tell us about the tank in the road that blocked you to getting from one town to another.
Well, let me take that one, because that and this is something that I was so happy about what Josh did. That related to a different company that we were invested in a different year and a different time, and there was a shareholders meeting, and a group of shareholders were trying to get in there and exert control over a company that we were already in control with the Lukoil people. And the guy who ran Lukoil had tanks put in the road and blocked people's access to the company meeting. And the vote went in our favor because nobody was able to get there. And they had nothing to do with Gazprom, but it was such a great story. And Josh heard the story. He incorporated it into the Gazprom story, which from a writing standpoint, I thought was exceptional.
And it's one of the reasons we didn't end up calling the company Gazprom, just because there was a lot going on that had to be squeezed into a pretty tight plot. And you were involved with a lot of different companies being privatized.
That's right.
And some pretty amusing stories, pretty fantastic stories from some of the other ones, some of which made it into the book.
Yeah. There's a great story about one of the early voucher auctions we did was a company called Cursed Tobacco, and it was in Russia, all these companies are really, really big. Karl Marx didn't believe in competition. He thought it was redundant and unnecessary. And so the communists never set up competitor companies. They might have a regional company, but they never have two companies compete. So all the companies in Russia are gigantic. And this Cursed Tobacco was the second or third largest cigarette company, and had like a third of the market share for cigarettes in Russia. And we were able to get a big piece of the company in the voucher auctions, and we went there to meet with them and show them our shareholders. We got the results from the place where you turn in vouchers, and it showed our ownership, and we took our papers over, and we wanted our names and our shares entered into the company record of shareholders, and they said, we have a different business model than you may think. We produce Marlboros and Pall Mall and Camels, and the tobacco is brought in on this end of the factory, and out comes the counterfeit cigarettes, and it's a really good business model. And if you want to be in that, fine, but we're being sued by Philip Morris and all these companies, and you're going to be party to that. And so they basically just said, look, you can be our partners, and it would be great to have Western partners, fighting all this stuff with us, or we'll buy your stock out for basically nothing. And we realized at that time that these guys were the mafia. I mean, they were delivering tobacco on one end of the factory and taking cigarettes out the other end of the factory and selling them, and none of the money was going through the actual business, and we just gave back our stock. We lost everything.
So you gave it. The stock was issued by the company, but you gave the stock to the mafia, these mafioso.
It didn't. We never registered our shares. We never tried to take control of the stock. I don't even know what happened to it. We may have sold it. We may have sold it for a nominal amount of money, but we gave up on that investment. Just who wants to be in business with mafia?
Really? And did you actually ever wind up going to Siberia, John?
I've traveled a number of places in Russia, but the answer is no. I've not actually. I've been to a town in Siberia, but I've not been. It wasn't in connection with this.
Okay, because a good portion of the book is set in Siberia, and it's pretty colorful. Not a place that I've ever had a burning desire to visit, frankly, but I know a lot of people do.
Yeah.
Martin Cruz Smith, who has also written about Russia, as I'm sure you know, creating a character named Arkady Renko, for what he thought was going to be his last book, decided to go to Siberia. Although he'd been writing about Russia for 35 years or more, decided that he needed to see Siberia. And it's only a couple of years ago that he and his daughter and his agent and went off to Siberia and took the train, which to a lot of people sounds colorful. Like here's an experience that you can't live your whole life without having. And he said, no, it's not an experience that you need in your life. It's really awful. It's every bit as bad as you think it could be.
Yeah.
I was going to go and have a look at it myself, but Peter, one of the Peters, told me not to because he said that the Russians were looking for some Westerners to arrest for negotiating purposes with the United States. And not long after that, Brittany Griner was arrested.
Right.
Now, I don't think I would have been necessarily sufficiently important to be worth anything to them. But if things had gone slightly differently, I would be playing in the WNBA right now.
So there was a great scene where you were taken fishing, John.
It was Peter.
That was Peter. Peter, and it's a true story.
Yeah, real story.
Yeah, Josh, why don't you tell the story?
Tell that story, because it's hard to believe that it's a true story. Of all the things in the book that I thought, oh, that's probably that I can see that happening. That's probably true. But this fishing story, no, that couldn't have happened. To tell this story.
Well, some important people had Peter out on their yacht on the Caspian Sea, and Peter thought he was going on a fishing trip, and they started. These people started bringing cases out onto the deck, wooden crates that they opened, and which were filled with old Soviet SKSs and AK-47s and grenades, and. Peter was very confused. They're like, "What are we going to do? Are we shooting fish today? Is this going to be an explosive attempt? Are we blowing sturgeon out of the Caspian?" And the guy said, no, we're just going to take these guns and we're going to go find some fishermen and we're going to take their fish. And Peter thought that they were going to have, some sort of high sea piracy shootouts with these fishing boats that they were going to cost. The guy said, no, it's much more civilized than that. We lay out all of our guns, and the fishing boat we're robbing lays out all of their guns, and whoever has more guns gets all the fish. It's very nicely organized. No one gets hurt. Everyone has a good time, except the fishermen. But yeah, and so they got some fresh Caspian sturgeon, had some very fresh caviar that night, and it was a pretty dramatic story, which I was very glad to hear, because it's a fantastic little interlude in the book.
And is this common? I mean, this happens more. This didn't happen just one time. This is fairly known that it happens.
I really don't know. I don't know if this was a special occasion that Peter was involved. I think it probably happened on the Caspian Sea more. Certainly, it happened more than once in the 90s. I don't know if it's still happening. I sort of doubt it. I think Russia is a little more organized in law enforcement terms now than it was then. But when you have a big box of grenades, you're pretty much entitled to the fish of any person you ask to turn over fish to you. This is a universal rule. Caspian Sea, Lake Superior, it works anywhere.
I think it happens a little less frequently at Lake Superior.
Well, on the Canadian side, those people are crazy. When they're not playing hockey during the off season, they can become very dangerous. They get high on maple syrup and just go out and start stealing American fish.
Okay, so one of my roles in this thing, and remember, Josh and I interviewed a bunch of people for it, and Josh has a vivid imagination, and a lot of times I'd have to sort of tamp down his imagination and try to keep it real. But
John was always saying, Josh, you will never play in the WNBA.
Yeah. I'm sorry I thwarted those dreams, but so there were a number of good stories that came up that didn't make it in the book, and I was doing a podcast earlier today, and I was talking about one. Do you want to tell the Refusnik story? That's a good story.
It was a story that Peter, one of the Peters, told me, which is that one of the Jewish Refusniks who was trying to get out of the Soviet Union and into Israel, these Jews who were trying to get out of the country weren't allowed to take anything with them, nothing valuable, no money, no possessions, valuable possessions. And so this guy there was a KGB agent who was detailed to making sure that this extremely wealthy guy who had accumulated a lot of money in business towards the end of the Soviet Union didn't manage to take any of that wealth out of Russia. And so one day this guy just packed up and he went to the airport and he was searched very thoroughly. I think they kept him there for like a day or two at the airport trying to figure out how he was getting money out, but they couldn't find anything, so they let him go. And then years later, he ran into this KGB agent ran into this Jewish businessman again and asked him, did you actually get your money out of Russia? And he said, yeah, I did. And he said, how on earth did you do that without us figuring it out? And what he had done apparently was the night before he left, he had a party and invited some American embassy officials to this party. And during the party, he invited them into his study where he had a fire burning in the fireplace and showed them all of his money, which he had converted as much as he could into dollars, and then burned it in front of them. Because he had found out that if you can get attested affidavits from American government officials that money has been destroyed, the Treasury will issue new bills. So he just destroyed the money in front of these guys, and the guys testified to having seen it destroyed. And then when he left the Soviet Union, he just went to Washington, and the Treasury issued him replacement money. So that's how he got it out.
It really is. There are so many stories in this book and around and surrounding the book. Do you think there's enough there to try another book? John, would you be up for that? And Josh, would you want to write it if you had enough good stories?
Well, I'm done with Russia. I've been wanting to write this book for 30 years, and I'm just fortunate to have been introduced to Josh, and the process went incredibly smoothly, and I'm glad the way it turned out. But I don't have another book in me. Sorry.
Well, that's a shame, but
Yeah.
Josh has
Siberia Job 2, Siberia Harder, or something like that.
Yeah. Josh has got 50 books in him. Josh is as prolific a writer as they come, and it'll be great to watch what comes out. And by the way, Josh, if I ever meet somebody who's got a great story and wants it told, I'm gonna bring him your way, because I really think you
I
did
appreciate
a
that.
good job. I really do, and I'm glad it worked out the way it did. So,
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. The start to finish, the whole thing has been a really good time.
On the other hand, Fake Money, Blue Smoke, your first book as Josh Haven, was all fiction, and so we could do another book that's all fiction, but this one happens to be very special because so much of it is true. So let's keep in mind that there could be another Russian thriller, Siberia thriller.
That's Gazprom calling to let you know the bad news.
Yeah.
and that's Otto. That's the KGB on the line.
We've been listening. So, nobody picked up my phone. God.
You can't get good help these days, Otto.
They're both fired. So there was a girl on the train. She was Siberian, or she was Russian.
She was fictional, is what she was. I'm sorry to say.
She was.
Yeah, I people ask about that a lot, and I always feel kind of guilty telling them. But we needed a native Russian as kind of a plot glue, and a little bit of romance also for plot interest. But I'm afraid she was pretty much of all the elements of the story, she was the most fictionalized one.
Too bad, because she was really a great character. But I mean, if you didn't know that it was fiction, or if you did know, it doesn't matter. She was a great character that you created, whether she was based on a real person or not. She was really helpful in all of this thing. She spoke multiple Siberian dialects. How fortunate for these guys to run into.
Well, I mean, in a sense, she was a conglomeration of all of the real Russians who helped out with this voucher project that John and Peter had, since they dealt with lots and lots of local people, lots of Russians who were involved in this. Couldn't fit them all into the book, so she was sort of the proxy for them.
So John, did you depart with a bunch of money from Russia when all was said and done at the end of the day?
I made some money in Russia. I think the book said I made 500 million. I can't remember the exact number, and that number that's a correct number for how much we made for the entire deal. But we had a lot of investors and a lot of expenses, and I think at the end of the day, I walked away with a couple of $1 million from this Gazprom deal. And that, by the way, that was a lot of money in the mid 90s. I was 32, 33 years old, and it allowed me to start my business and did, which went great. But it wasn't. I didn't walk away with that much money from Russia.
Not with billions. There are some people who nowadays still think that a couple of million is real money. So I know for you it's a rounding error, but for Josh and me, it's real money.
Well, for the moment, Otto, after this book hits number 1, we're all going to be picking out to decide what color you want your private jet to be.
Absolutely. The down payment on the new Rolls Royce, here it comes. So any of you out there watching us and listening to us tonight, remember, we're counting on you to help make us as wealthy as John is.
We need the Rolls Royce money from the audience.
So John, you're the chairman of a board of some kind at the Hoover Institute, and so anybody who's watching, there's going to be a big event at the Hoover Institute to launch this book or to celebrate this book, and Condoleezza Rice is going to be the interviewer or the interlocutor or whatever we want to call her.
Yeah. So Connie's going to introduce the event, and then a gentleman by the name of Stephen Kotkin, who's a senior fellow at Hoover, is going to moderate. He and I are going to have a conversation about Russia and the book. And Stephen is an expert on totalitarianism in China and Russia. He's also written 2 volumes on Stalin, the work on Stalin. He's got a 3rd volume coming out. So he's a very special guy, and that ought to be a good event. And that's tomorrow night at the Hoover Institute.
Tomorrow night. Oh, that's soon. Good. I wish I could be there. I think that would be a really great event.
Yeah, I think we've got 150 people coming. It should be fun. I think it's the first time they've ever had used a fictional book or introduced a fictional book. All of the stuff they do at Hoover is nonfiction and well researched.
Well, this is nonfiction, just fictionalized.
Fictionalized nonfiction. Okay,
yeah.
That's quite a category.
Yeah, well, it's like Truman Capote when he wrote his great crime novel. It was all true, but fictionalized, made up dialogue and so on. Yeah. It's known as faction.
Faction. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I like to think of the Siberia job as the Russian energy industry is the Devil Wears Prada.
It's exactly the way I would have looked at it myself.
Meryl Streep is going to play John, and you might laugh, but she'd be perfect for that.
She could be. She's pretty adaptable.
Yeah.
So I want to make the invitation to any of our watchers, any of our audience, if you have any questions that you would like to ask of either John or Josh or me, feel free to type something in. I'm not sure that I know how to do anything about it if it shows up on the screen, but I'll try. Ryan is nearby, so he can guide me if we have any questions. So I'm not seeing anything there, which is too bad. It means that either we told you everything you ever wanted to know about this book, or you've nodded off, which I blame myself.
It's our perfect thoroughness in discussing this.
So what else, Josh? What are you doing now? What are you working on now? Are you in the middle of writing another book?
Well, yeah, always. But I've got another book coming out August 1st, I think, with your partners in this book, Norton. That's under my other name, J.H. Galanter. It's going to be the 3rd in my Captain Gray series, sort of Napoleonic War James Bond series. Which
is this the Montevideo book?
Yeah, the Montevideo brief. Yeah. It's a fantastic book. I think people are already saying it's possibly the greatest book ever written after the Siberia job, but I'll let history be the judge of that. I don't want to get ahead of myself.
Yeah, I was in Warren's office. I think I grabbed a copy of that. It's a good book. It's a good read. It's a quick read. Good read.
Thank you. Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to Condi introducing that sometime in August.
So just a message from Raul in Los Angeles, who said, I'm eager to read the book now that I've watched this conversation. Why? Well, thank you, Raul.
Thanks, Raul.
I think we all appreciate that. So, John, apart from promoting this book, which you have done tirelessly for the last month, what's your next project?
Well, I'm going to work on this. I'm going to work on promoting this book until July 1st, and then it needs to kind of fly on its own.
Okay.
So, but I've got a lot. I'm doing a lot of stuff. I still run a hedge fund. I'm still working on. I have a big plan to bring a high-speed train to Texas, which will run between Dallas and Houston. I'm still busy at the Hoover Institute. Which is doing great work. fantastic senior fellows, great library and archives. It's a division within Stanford University. It's helped counterbalance the university and keep it on track. So I've got lots going on.
Cynthia has written, but it's clear that she has read the book because she's asking, have either of you been to the Hungry Duck lately?
If only. No, I'm afraid that we haven't. I don't think either of us has swung by the Duck recently. I did talk to Doug Steele pretty recently.
Talk a little about the Hungry Duck.
The Hungry Duck was the club in Moscow in the mid '90s for craziness. It was run by a guy named Doug Steele, who was one of the few people connected to the book who was just like, yeah, use my name, I don't care. Even though his role in the book involves an actual kidnapping attempt by Chechen terrorists who were planning to murder him because of a business disagreement. And that all started with the mother of one of them being accidentally insulted by his business partner at a restaurant that he also had previously owned connected to the Duck. But it's crazy stuff, but pretty much everything connected to the Hungry Duck in the book is entirely real there.
That was a really exciting sequence. A lot of stuff happened there really fast.
Yeah, the attempted kidnapping that was broken up by one of his bartenders who was just coming on for his shift, and just the general craziness of the club. I think it's still open. I haven't been there myself because Peter told me not to go to Russia at all, but probably specifically told me not to go to the Hungry Duck. But I think it's still there if anyone wants to drop over and let me know how it's doing.
Yeah. Where's Doug Steele living now?
He's in Poland. He had to get out of Russia, I think, after a certain point because of these continuing business disagreements with people trying to kidnap him and so forth. I think maybe he's in real estate now. He's just he's one of those guys. He's always coming up with ideas for stuff. He's a very interesting guy to talk to.
Yeah. It is. Sorry.
I was going to say he was introduced to me by Bernie Sucher, who run the other sort of club, the other club in the book, which was Uncle Gilly's, which you were a big fan of.
Yeah. Bernie's a great guy. Bernie was a club owner and a banker. He started one of the first banks in Moscow. We used to wire money to his Troika Dialogue Bank, and they would turn that money into cash and go buy vouchers with it. And we'd take the vouchers and put them into these various voucher auctions. But Bernie's a very good friend of mine. And it's somewhat disappointing. I know a lot of these folks who worked in Russia, and there was so much hope in the mid '90s, and things looked like they were going so well, and the system looked like it was gonna flourish. And then after Yeltsin left and resigned and Putin became president, the KGB and the security apparatus kind of slowly took over things, and the oligarchs, and there was they were sort of a parasitic influence on the free market system, and Russia never really, foreigners never could really make anything happen over there. And all these people spent so much time in Russia, such a large part of their careers. It's kind of sad. They were, most of them were never able to make money.
Here's a question from an intelligent question from a friend in New Jersey. Are there any elements of this story that still resonate today and shed light on present day Russia?
Yes, very, very much. Because this is sort of the entire situation in Russia, who's running things, what's going on with Putin, energy interests that are really financing all of Russia, the explosion of the Nord Stream pipeline, all of that stuff sort of dates back to the emergence of the oligarchs after the end of communism, which is really what this book is about. The transfer of state ownership to private ownership, and how that was subverted by a few people, sort of former commissars who seized control of a lot of Russia's industry.
Yeah,
so this book is sort of a prequel to the Ukrainian war.
Yeah. I mean, one thing I'd point out is, when we were there, when I was there a lot in the mid '90s, the Russians were prepared to do things the right way, the legal way. List their companies on stock exchanges, publish audited reports, borrow money from banks, run the business in a normal way. What happened over time, and largely because of the security and KGB folks and the corrupt elements of society, the businesses were run in a corrupt way, where with bribery, where every person along the way in the business would take something or take what they needed, and so what happened is nobody was incentivized to follow the rules, and in the system where 20 or 25% of the people are stealing on a regular basis. That incentivizes the honest people to steal as well. And we're very fortunate in this country that people follow the rules, and you don't have to steal to get rich. But in Russia, that's not the case. And that kind of gets back to the heart of the question. And what's wrong with Russia is that they just don't have the institutions and the legal system to get people to do things the right way.
Yeah, I mean, when I talk about this book to people, I really say that it's the story of the beginning of the Russian oligarchy, which is what I take away from this book more than, I mean, aside from all the fun parts. I mean, the seriousness of it really does resonate today and continues today.
Yeah, but I mean that's fair. I mean, all the oligarchs were active when we were active. They hadn't become oligarchs yet. They became oligarchs after Putin got into power, and there was another phase in the market called the loans for shares scheme, where these oligarchs got stock by lending money to the government after 1998, and that's where the real kind of illicit transfer of state-owned assets happened. It wasn't during the voucher auctions. So.
The Henry Kissinger was in my home in Connecticut. He was the speaker for a fundraiser for a local politician, and he said, "I'm sure she'd be a great politician, but I don't know anything about local politics. But I do know something about international politics. And let me tell you something about Russia. This is when everybody in America, big companies in America, were rushing there to get a foothold into this very, very large market." And he said something that I thought was really fascinating. And he said, "I just want you to understand something. Americans are so generous and so honest on balance. And they're different from the Russians. You think that the Russians are like you, and now they have more democracy, and that they want to do the same things that Americans do. But it's not true. They're nationalistic." And I was at a big group of young, important, wealthy Russians who were in their 30s or early 40s. And it was clear from everything that they were saying that they had no interest in being part of a normal capitalistic society. If you listen to what they were saying, you knew that they were looking for the edge, the way that the oligarchs did and made their fortunes. Now, I don't know if the people he was meeting became oligarchs, but it was a kind of a wake-up call to remind us that they're not quite like us.
Well, they've had a pretty long run of bad luck at this point between the oligarchs and communism, and I'm not sure things were fantastic under the czars either. So yeah, Russia's kind of had a rough go of it, but any day now it's going to turn around.
It's all gonna get better.
All that karma they've earned up, Russia's just going to bloom into a fantastic democracy, super rich. Great Disneylands in all the minor cities.
I think we would all like to see that, but I think it's a long shot.
Yeah. Well. On that happy note,
Yeah, fingers crossed.
Yeah. So I guess we should wind this down. I just want to remind everybody that the book is The Siberia Job, which I'm going to show you again by putting it in front of my camera, obviously not very clearly. And it really is. If you want a true thriller that is based on fact, on true events, and important in its way, as a way of learning a lot about what it was like in Russia 40 years ago, 30 years ago rather. This is the way to do it and have fun doing it. So thank you, John. Thank you, Josh. And thank you all for being with us tonight. I'm going to close it out now. Okay.
Thanks, Otto. You're the best.
Thanks, Otto.